Welcome back to Fast Market on the Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall alongside Kevin Hinks over at the CBO. Time now for our cash tag segment. We're talking about Nvidia and all things AI. For that, we want to bring in our next guest, and that is Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. Happy Friday to you. So earlier we were talking about AMD because it hit a new all-time high, and you have some data that shows a comparison between Nvidia and AMD. So what does that look like now?
Yeah, the gap between Nvidia and AMD has stayed enormous over the last couple of years. We love AMD. We got long AMD in June, and it's been on a tear ever since. We like the second place position that they're in. There's a lot of upside there, but the winner, the king, is still Nvidia. And if you're playing AI, if you're playing data center build out, then Nvidia just has to be part of the equation. There's no way around it. And so when we look at the trajectory of these compute labs building out, of the pace at which ChatGPT and others are adding users, there's just no question that this is a trend that is accelerating. It's enormous and it's permanent. There's a complete shift in how computers work happening right now, very reminiscent of how computers shifted when we went to the internet, except for much faster and much larger. And so when that type of thing is happening, I think the best thing for investors and traders to do is to just say, I'm going to ride this wave. I'm not going to try to time each and every move inside of this, because it's so transformative that simply owning the winner in the space is enough to return, to get great returns. And so when we look at Nvidia versus AMD, Nvidia is dominant. It will continue to stay dominant. The amount of money that they're bringing in and able to put into R&D will keep them dominant. It's one of the best executing companies in the history of the world. And so there will be multiple winners in the AI data center, digital mining race, but Nvidia is first place, and the gap seems to only be growing.
Andy, this is a company that's got an unbelievable AI chip business.
Yeah.
But very possible what might overtake that over time is the venture capital arm of Nvidia. That is, as I read it right now, Andy, they're in automotive, cloud computing, AI infrastructure, semiconductor manufacturing, telecom innovation. I can keep going. They're going to own not only the number one chip that they keep innovating on. Remember, the Rubin is waiting on the horizon as a new chip, but they're also investing in all these companies where they're going to own major chunks in all these companies. This venture capital arm might be the greatest engine for profits that we've seen. So what is more important? Obviously now the chips are more important. Do you see a day where this venture capital arm overtakes Nvidia? Because remember, the cyclical nature of these chips is often a boom bust kind of thing. They're taking the volatility out by owning the other parts, in my opinion. Your thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, it's extremely reminiscent of what Amazon did with the internet. There was a point in time where Amazon was just a bookstore, and then they could sell anything to you and get it to you in 2 days. And then they opened up our marketplace, and then they essentially created venture arms inside of their company. The Kindle. They had AWS, which is now a behemoth industry in and of itself. So I think it's a really good point that you're making, that NVIDIA is, they know that there's only so many GPUs they can make, and they want to get in on the application layer of what they're enabling. And I think that's an interesting thing for investors to be thinking about. It's something we think about a lot at LikeFolio, is what is that application layer? What does that look like? Which small companies are likely to benefit the most from this massive mega trend and be, yes, empowered by NVIDIA, but not necessarily reliant on it, and not necessarily subject to the boom and bust cycles of semiconductors. And so there are small companies out there that Nvidia is funding, that Nvidia is creating, and there are small companies out there that are publicly traded right now that investors could be looking at as the pin action winners off of this entire trend. I think when we follow in the lead of a great company and executor like Nvidia, and we see this is what they're doing with their capital, it makes me think, as an investor, why am I not doing the same thing?
And let me ask you this. So we've been seeing some calls this week from, front runners in AI development, from the likes of Jeffrey Hinton and others, whether it's both pioneers and policymakers, who've said we need to kind of pause this and put up some guardrails around AI until it's proven safe. So if that gains traction, if that movement gains traction, do you see that as a potential headwind? Because before, you even had Elon Musk calling for some more guardrails around this, even though, obviously they've been developing Grok. What's your thought on that as a potential headwind for the sector?
I think that the cow is out of the barn. It reminds me a lot of, the government fought Bitcoin and cryptocurrency until it finally submitted. The government fought to keep space exploration in its own house until SpaceX just broke through with the superior solution. I think with 800 million users on ChatGPT in a matter of 2.5 years, trying to wrangle that back into the control of the government is going to be a very difficult thing to do. So I don't see that as an enormous headwind. I do think that there can be some regulatory frameworks that might actually embolden the industry and make the industry a little bit more robust for more users. But that's the role I think government will end up playing here, especially with an administration like the Trump administration, which is not exactly heavy-handed when it comes to regulating new technologies or new business ventures. So I kind of throw that out as, good luck with all that.
Okay. All right, Andy, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for bringing us your latest data on NVIDIA. And you make a good point about good luck with that. Maybe they will at some point.